Hello again. You joined me on the MUN, except I didn't land here. This is just the title screen of Kerbal Space Program, but it is where I want to go in today's installment of Lowne Aerospace III, the third one, hopefully with better results than this chap. Last episode we took to the skies on our very first flight, all culminating with a successful landing on Minmus, Kerbin's mintiest satellite. But now, playtime is over. It's time to start heading to more challenging frontiers, namely the MUN. And even though this is only our second proper, for real space flight, I wanted to set myself the challenge of doing it Apollo style. And so that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. We begin in the vehicle assembly building, and as you can see from the rather barren parts list on the left, we don't have a great deal of pieces to work with. At a minimum, I wanted to use the stock analog parts for the Apollo command module and the Apollo lunar lander, and then sort of just build the whole rocket around that. And I began with the lander, since it was going to be the trickiest part of the build, purely because of how difficult it is to elegantly integrate the Science Junior into landers, and also because, like Apollo, I wanted this to be a two-stage lander. The first stage lands, and the second stage lifts the command pod away from the lander base as a fairly minimalist spacecraft that then reunites with the Apollo command vehicle in low MUN orbit. Speaking of that, the construction of the Apollo command vehicle is much quicker than the construction of the lander because it's a much more simple machine, right? We just got the, that's the Poodle engine, but configured to look like the upper stage of the Ariane 5, I believe that engine variant is based on, and then, yeah, just a fuel tank and the aforementioned Apollo style command pod. Now here I'm trying to encase it in a fairing, which was a little bit tricky because I haven't actually unlocked the 2.5 meter diameter fairing base, so I had to get a little bit creative with the 1.875 meter, I think that's the diameter, piece to kind of build a payload fairing for the upper stage of the rocket. And you just know, for the first stage core, I had to make it orange. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. And I added these, I guess, Atlas 5 style solid rocket boosters just to give us a bit more oomph at liftoff, because this is going to be a very, very important rocket for Lowne Aerospace. It's going to really solidify us as the main launch company on the planet. Literally, we are. So, very, very important launch. And, well, the rocket construction looks basically done. And look at that! The Kerbin Broadcasting Agency is covering the launch right now! But wait, it's saying that this is a frivolous launch and a complete waste of money and how it's completely unnecessary? But I've just explained the importance of this launch! Alright, well, while I joke, inconsistent media coverage of world events is a problem we face every day, which is why I'm working with Ground News for this video. Ground News was founded by a former NASA engineer and is a news source that lets you compare articles from a wide range of sources to help you verify the information and to see the full picture. Every Ground News story comes with a simple visual breakdown of each publisher's political bias, reliability, ownership, and headlines. And to ensure Ground News is a neutral commentator, this is all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. Take this story about Starship's 8th launch. Over 450 news outlets covered it, disproportionately more from the left versus the right, and you can compare how each side of the spectrum chose to describe the launch in their headlines to see how bias can affect framing. The bias comparison tab shows us that the left focused on SpaceX's failure and possible incompetence, while the right highlighted the successful booster catch, framing the test in a more favourable manner. Another feature I love is the blind spot feed, which highlights stories underreported by one side of the political spectrum. For example, if you lean right, you probably missed this story about Canadian businesses urging the government to reduce internal trade barriers to prevent political Canadian recession amid ongoing trade uncertainty. Ground News is fully user-funded to ensure that they're not biased themselves, and so if you want a more truthful and objective news source, then go to ground.news/MattLowne, linked below, or scan the QR code to get 40% off their unlimited access plan. Thank you so much to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. And we are off on only our second ever orbital mission for our space program in this playthrough. And weirdly, it's also 2 for 2 for orange first stage tanks. Although, now that we've unlocked auto struts, this rocket should hopefully be a little bit less wobbly than the last one. And we now have the gang all here. Bob Kerman is not going to be heading off into space on his own. We have a crack team of 3. Ace pilot Jebediah Kerman, the truly fearless leader of the Kerbonauts, genius scientist Bob Kerman, able to expertly run the experiments to give us the science we need, and Bill is here too. And I think we're definitely getting away from the early game rut where rockets are definitely built to compromise. This rocket almost looks like something you'd design in Sandbox with a fully unlocked parts list, but not quite. The main shortcoming is that really dumb looking interstage fairing, because I haven't unlocked the fairing with the same diameter base I should say, as the first and second stage fuel tanks. But rest assured, unlocking that is priority numero uno once we've completed this mission. And to reiterate the rules of this playthrough, we're not going to be getting a great deal of science from the MUN because I'm limiting my missions to 1 landing per celestial body. No biome hopping or any other means of stretching the amount of science earned. The lab is also out of the question. 1 landing per place, with science experiments run only from that landing site. And while the craft is in space, of course, which, I guess is technically still in space when it's landed, but, let us not get bogged down in semantics here. We're certainly not getting bogged down by the atmosphere because, look, we now have an apoapsis of 80 kilometers, so well and truly above the atmospheric border of Kerbin. And now we've entered the vacuum space. I've staged the launch escape system that we no longer need, and of course we can now ditch that horrifically ugly interstage fairing, revealing the Apollo style capsule. I probably should have said earlier what I meant by Apollo style in case anyone here is unfamiliar with the nomenclature. So in KSP, you generally have 2 kinds of landings. So the last mission we did to Minmus, that was what we would call a direct ascent mission, because basically you launch the spacecraft, the entire thing goes to the place you go in, the entire thing lands there, and then the entire thing goes back, potentially dropping stages along the way. Apollo style is different because it's like the American Apollo missions to the moon. So you have a lander capsule and a separate command pod. So the command pod generally will take the lander to orbit the place that you want to land on. The lander then separates and, as you might be able to figure out, lands there. And then once it's done everything it needs to do on the surface, it will then take off and then redock with the command ship that's kind of been left in orbit. That's the gist of things. This is obviously not a recreation of the actual Apollo missions, because although we have the Apollo-style command pod and the Apollo-style lander can that comes with the Making History DLC, the rest of the rocket, I guess it kind of looks a bit like the Apollo-style command pod at least, but not so much the lander. Again, the lander was kind of built as a bit of a compromise because I had to have the Science Junior. Well, I guess I didn't need the Science Junior, but I wanted to bring the Science Junior, which then didn't really give us many options when it came to the design. It's now disappeared off the screen, so this is a great moment to be talking about the looks of the lander. But I kind of used those flag pieces to kind of build a sort of a structural fuselage look. Some of the flags, the flag parts, you can set them to have actual physical thickness rather than just being thin as paper. So I've set them as the white panel. And I think it came out quite nicely. I don't think I've ever used flags in this method before, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. And here we are, getting our encounter with the MUN. Now, what I really should have done, in retrospect, was do try and make this a bit more true to Apollo's, although I've said this is not a recreation of the Apollo missions for hopefully obvious reasons. One thing the Apollo missions did do was a free return trajectory, such that if, they passed by the moon, and there was some sort of engine failure or something that left the spacecraft unable to fire its engines or thrusters or orient itself or whatever problem would have happened, it would have just flown past the moon and then returned to Earth safely without any kind of engine input from the spacecraft, hence free return trajectory. It would have freely returned to Earth. You can do this in Kerbal Space Program, just for whatever reason I did not. I guess I just forgot that was a thing Apollo did. What it didn't do was a little EVA upon entering the moon's sphere of influence, because why would they? Their science experiments don't work like the Kerbal Space Program experiments. So again, I've said this previously in this playthrough, but planets and moons, they have 2 kinds of space above them. So you have space close to the planet or moon and space high above the planet or moon, and you get different science for running the experiments in each place, or in this case each height. So around all of our science experiments, as soon as we enter the sphere of influence of the MUN, so we would be in space high above it, now we're in low MUN orbit, we can now run the science experiments once again. So there's the Science Junior and the Mystery Goo running. We also have the barometer and the thermometer, and I believe that's it in terms of how many science experiments we actually have at the moment, if you don't count the EVA science experiment pack, which, as you can see, Bob Kerman is wearing on his back. He again does not have a parachute. We're going to be running that on the surface of the MUN. And but yeah, going after this mission, we'll unlock a few more science experiments. We can try and net a bit more science points on future missions in this playthrough. And yeah, if you are enjoying things so far, then don't forget to leave a little like on the video if you'd like to. But let us now get to the main part of the mission, which is, of course, doing the actual MUN landing. So we've got our lander here, all separated from the mothership. We've got 2 Kerbals on board, Jebediah Kerman, who's going to be piloting this thing, and Bob Kerman, who's going to be running all the science experiments once we get to the surface of the MUN. A little bit of a weird visual glitch with the landing legs here. They didn't fully deploy, and then... just wait for it. They sort of then just pinged open. So I think maybe Time Warp might have messed with the deployment animation of the landing legs. Not quite sure. But now we're going to begin our burn. So we've got loads of Delta V in this lander. I very much underestimated the, I guess, the efficiency of the Spark upper stage engine and how much fuel that lander can actually contain. So I believe, you guys will have to rewind the video and check the time lapse, but I believe that I didn't actually add any extra fuel tanks to that lander can. The lander can piece has liquid fuel and oxidizer reserves just built into it, and I just attached an engine to that, and that was basically all I did. I did add an SAS wheel though, because the actual wheel authority of that command pod is very, very weak. So I think the intention is to use those RCS thrusters that are built in, but who's got time for that, eh? I just added a big old reaction wheel to make things a bit easier. Didn't really help with the landing though. As you can see, we've awkwardly perched on this rock for the duration of the time we're spending on the surface of the MUN. You'll see the lander slowly migrating to the left there, very, very slowly, but it didn't fall over, so that was all good. So now we've got Bob Kerman on EVA. I've got Bob Kerman in the blue, I think it's like an ESA inspired suit, just to differentiate him from whichever other Kerbal is coming with him. I'm going to try and at least have 2 Kerbals on every landing, just because just seems more fun that way. Oh, bit of a teeter there of the lander. Just seems more fun to have 2 Kerbals with us. So Bob Kerman is doing a little flyby, doing an inspection of the very precariously positioned lander, lighting up those old headlights there. And now we're going to perform our EVA science experiment, which again is going to be the old game of golf that we played on the surface of Minmus. Now, I actually knew this fact, but I neglected to mention it when I was doing the commentary for the Minmus mission for some reason, but people kind of brought it up in the comments for the separate kind of Minmus mission video, that the golf club experiment thing that I've just done is a reference to a real life event that happened on the Apollo missions. Hey, this is kind of like, it rhymes, eh? I think the top comment on my video is by, I wrote this down, I don't know how to say this name, Karagianis. There you go. If you know, you know. As mentioned that the golf experiment is a reference to astronaut Alan Shepard, who smuggled an improvised golf club and 2 balls onto Apollo 14 so he could play golf on the moon. I don't know if he ever actually got the record for like longest drive or longest golf hit or whatever. Makes sense, right? But, you know, modern drivers are very good. So I don't care to pause my commentary and research the matter further. But maybe Karagianis can leave another comment in the comment section below and enlighten us even further about the wonders of the Apollo program, such as the amazing lander cam, which we are now reboarding. We got the free IVA mod installed in case any of you are a bit confused as to why when I enter command pods it suddenly goes to first person. I have to sort of navigate the craft to find my seat. That's kind of why. I love free IVA mod. I've known about it for the longest time, but I just thought, well, it doesn't really add that much. Guys, it's like game changing. You should install free IVA if you haven't got it. It's brilliant. I love it. Great mod. Anyway, getting a bit sidetracked here. Look at all the science racking up on the left-hand side of our screen. Wow, okay, I thought it would go on a bit longer than that. But either way, we've got a lot of science. We've done I didn't talk about it when I did it, so maybe I should quickly recap. I ran all of our science experiments that are on the lander itself. We did the EVA Golf Club experiment. I took a surface sample from the MUN, and I did a crew report in the lander when it was touched down, and I did an EVA report when kind of on the surface of the MUN, and another EVA report just like using the jetpack, so it's kind of like flying just above the surface of the MUN. I believe Jebediah Kerman did the EVA report from the surface. Bob did it from the air. Yeah, you know, above the ground, right? Seems ironic, right? You'd think it would be the other way around, given those two Kerbals as personalities. But regardless, we're now going to shut down our first stage Terrier engine and get ready to launch the second stage. And we are off once again. Jebediah Kerman and Bob Kerman rapidly heading back towards low MUN orbit so they can be reunited with Bill Kerman, who's been there all on his own. Loneliest Kerbal in the space program so far, given that he was so far away from his home planet and, you know, was obviously not with Jebediah and Bob Kerman. And we've got ComNet enabled, so just like Michael Collins in real life and all the other people that didn't go down to the surface of the moon on the Apollo program missions, when he was passing behind the MUN, so, you know, the far side of the MUN, he would have had no connection to the Kerbal Space Center, so he would have been well and truly on his own. Poor old Bill. So Jebediah Kerman and Bob Kerman give him a good firm handshake when they get back to the spacecraft. So I'm just playing around with prograde, retrograde, and normal and anti-normal on the nav board to kind of force our encounter. I could see the separation from the target put our spacecraft, so the lander spacecraft, was going to be ahead of the target command module. So what I did was I raised our apoapsis to be above the command module's orbit. You know, we're in a higher orbit. A higher orbit is a slower orbit, so that allows the command pod to catch up to us, and by the time we get to our second encounter node now, we've got a very, very close separation. Really don't know why that was so difficult for me to say. Luckily, as I've said, this playthrough is not a tutorial. It's like the only time I've actually played through the science mode of Kerbal Space Program, not explicitly for a tutorial. The exception being the Stranded series. People say I abandoned that. I feel like that series just sort of ran its course, right? We landed on Eve. That's kind of like the final boss of Kerbal Space Program, and I don't know, people didn't really watch those videos. I think some of them have gained sort of retrospective, like, a success. So after a couple of years, the algorithm suddenly just started pushing one of them. The one I did with Martin C. to Pants to Eve, I think, did pretty well, as do most Eve rescue missions. But yeah, other than the Stranded, I believe this is kind of the first time I've done a proper playthrough of Kerbal Space Program Science Mode, not as a tutorial. You know, this is an Apollo-style MUN landing. This is really difficult for a beginner, so hopefully no beginners are trying to follow through. And if you are a beginner and are following through and have managed to do all of this well, then my hat goes off to you. You should probably start a YouTube channel. Actually, don't start a YouTube channel because you're obviously much better at the game than I am. So don't do that. But you can carry on watching this video. How about that? So yeah, we've reunited our space frogs. I had to take the data from the lander can and store it onto the Apollo command pod, because we're not going to be landing the lander can on Kerbin, right? It's going to get destroyed in the atmosphere. We do have the Delta V to deorbit ourselves, or, you know, put ourselves on a collision course with the surface of the MUN. Then we can ditch the lander can and then reorbit ourselves so we don't crash into the surface of the MUN. But I don't know, it's more fun to just take it back to Kerbin with us, and because the lander is attached via that docking port, it kind of expands the livable space on board the spacecraft, much like the real Apollo missions. I feel like I've done like actual Apollo recreations before, and I haven't talked about the Apollo missions as much as having this video, which isn't even, it's not a tutorial and it's also not an Apollo recreation, but somehow I've managed to shoehorn in lots of similarities with the real Apollo missions. I guess it's always going to be inevitable, right? We're going to the moon and landing in the exact same fashion, and, you know, mission sequence, is that the right way of saying that, as the real Apollo missions. But now it must all come to an end. We've separated the fuel tanks and engine and power modules and all that of the command pod, and we've also separated the little lander. Oh, it's blowing up, it's exploded. All very sad as we re-enter the atmosphere. And yeah, that's why we had to take the science out of the command pod, the lander can, because obviously all that science would have just exploded right around now, or, you know, a few seconds ago, had we not done that. But the science is on board the command pod here, which is very much in one piece, so we'll be able to recover that science and get to spend it at the tech tree, unlock lots of new toys for future missions. And I'm not quite sure where to go on the next mission. I'm umming and ahhing a couple of things, you know, either maybe building a small space station in low Kerbin orbit now that we've conquered our two natural satellites here, Or do I just go for like building a satellite network maybe to expand our communications reaches so we can get kind of further out, so when we do send missions to places like Joule and Elu, etc., we have a better chance of staying connected to the Kerbal Space Center? Or should I just go somewhere like, I don't know, I guess Juna is like the next logical destination to go to after MUN and Minmus, or we go somewhere else, like maybe somewhere really out there, like Elu or Lathe or somewhere. I guess I've got to have a sit down and have a think before building the next rocket. But now we can have a look at what toys we can unlock. So I decided to unlock Advanced Electrics, just so we can get the extendable solar panels, because they give us a slightly more reliable supply of electricity, and also they just look cooler than the static solar panels. From there, I then had a little meander around the tech tree and settled on the electronics tab, because this contains some more science experiments that we can run on missions, therefore getting us more science. We really want to be kind of prioritizing the nodes that contain science experiments. After that, I then splurged on advanced exploration, mostly for the deployable ladders. The lab would be very useful had I not set the arbitrary rule that I wasn't allowed to use it, because the lab can generate obscene amounts of science. And we've only got 315.5 science points remaining, so we are dwindling a bit now. I had a little browse of the various nodes we've got available, and eventually I remembered that I wanted to unlock the 2.5 meter diameter fairing piece, so we don't have awkward fairings like we did for this mission just gone. So I unlocked the specialized construction node, and now the only node we can really unlock after that is aerodynamics, with the very limited amount of science we have remaining. And that's it. That's all the unlocking we're going to be doing at the end of our MUN mission. So hope you enjoyed things and are excited for the next mission we're going to do in Lowne Aerospace 3, the third one. Massive thank you to the names on the right-hand side of the screen. They are my Patreon supporters and my YouTube channel members who make all of this content possible by very, very kindly supporting me directly. If you want to join their numbers, there are links below. Also linked below is a link to our amazing sponsor today, Ground News. Ground News has been a huge supporter of me for a number of years now, so really, really happy that we can still work together. And yeah, that's the end of the video. I very much hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next installment.